Another U.S. presidential candidate has brought his campaign to Canada. Ralph Nader is going to host a fundraiser tonight with Americans living in Toronto. This is Nader's fifth bid for the White House. He is 74 now, still an independent, and he has criticized the two-party political system in the U.S., saying it does not offer Americans enough choice. Nader also says the United States could learn from Canada's health care and electoral systems. Joining us now, Solon Simmons, professor at the Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University. Sir, what do you make of Mr. Nader's running again? This guy just never quits.
No, he doesn't, and I think there might be a method behind the madness. We might be ready for a return of Ralph. The poll numbers have been better for him than they were last time around. He was up around 4% for a while, down more around his 3% now. He's pushing, I think he's acting as a kind of a remnant of a liberal cause that had come before and trying to carry through to take advantage of a little bit of Obama fatigue. And we'll see if there's any opportunity for him to take advantage of that. So
if he has any impact on the race at all, he'll bleed support from the Democrats?
Well, in general, you'd think that. I mean, you think about the left. He's really a figure of the left, and he's trying to remind us of what the left might be. The first version of the left was anti-monarchist, which was, we're all that now. We're Republicans, Democrats, everyone doesn't like the divine right of kings. The newest version is anti-supremacist in the sense that it's about race and gender and the dependent world and the developing world. But also, it's his is an anti-corporate message, and that's sort of fallen off a little bit, and he's trying to remind us of that. And he updated that from a labor movement approach to a consumer movement approach. And if he can continue with that, there are consumer troubles on the horizon. Perhaps people might turn to him again, having forgotten or forgiven him for supposedly acting as a spoiler.
Let me ask you about the TV campaigns. This has been fascinating. They both went a little negative at the same time, and then suddenly Paris Hilton comes out of nowhere and steals all the thunder.
Yeah, this was an amazing moment. You know, John McCain had to do something really big. We were reporting this race as if it's close, and it is in the national numbers, but it's not if you look state by state. And guess what? That's how it's going to be won or lost, is state by state. And Obama is still really far ahead. You know who's behind when you see who's going negative. Even though Obama's strategy is not to be negative, he's not negative in part because he's far ahead. The Paris Hilton thing is a way to try to, in a way, put gender back in the race, if you think about it, by saying he's sort of like, you know, we don't see male celebrities or rap stars even, or something of that kind. So it's a very different kind of approach that they try to do. And it is pretty negative. We'll see if that, it seems to have worked for a little while. It's falling off now as we move forward.
Now, while we've got a guy who specializes in conflict analysis and resolution with us, let me ask you this question. George Bush has asked Russia to stop. He's asked for a ceasefire in Georgia. What can the world do here? And I mean, is the President of the United States as helpless as the rest of us in watching this scenario unfold?
He's certainly not as helpless as the rest of us. But I think that there's something we're learning about a strategic decision here. It's very strange and jarring to watch him in the sports arena watching Michael Phelps while this whole war is taking place. And this is really a first-class war. This is a major power, Russia, attacking a country which was once part of its orbit, and we don't have any response, seemingly, or very little, and not as much from the campaigns as we might like. I think there's some kind of behind-the-scenes acceptance here, some kind of sense that what can one do or what should one do, especially given that the United States has lost its moral authority and has ambitions in Iran of which we don't know what they'll be. But that really complicates the entire setting. And George Bush is sending a signal, I'm not going to do much here.
Yeah, it's like it's a fait accompli, and the only way you mess with this is you invite the Russians to tango with you. It's kind of like when the Americans and the Brits go into Iraq, the Russians don't like that, but if they want to do anything about it, they're tangling with the U.S. military.
That's exactly right. You don't want military confrontation between the major players now. But you know, think of it in other terms. That it starts in the opening of the Olympic ceremonies, where China is somehow replacing Russia or the Soviet Union as the major competitor of the United States. You remember back in the 80s, it was always the medal counts between the Soviets and the Americans. Now it's the Chinese. Well, maybe there's a little bit of concern with a new world order. It's hard to say, but there's something about recognition going on here, and it's certainly troubling.
Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember when the East Germans were a factor, too.
That's true.
You mentioned moral authority. Like, you know, you think the United States has slipped a notch with that. What about George Bush as a lame duck president? Is that part of this as well?
I think it is. But again, look at what he's emphasizing. He's emphasizing religious freedom in China, and that's clearly one of his top priorities. He feels he has leverage there. He's probably trying to get done a few things that he was not able to get done during his presidency, and he'd like to see some religious freedom in China, perhaps more than civil liberties, and that might be his value system. A lame duck can still do a lot as a president. The presidency is probably more important now than it ever has been, so I think George Bush is making some decisions here.
Do you think the fact that suddenly we have these major events on the world stage might help John McCain, because he's supposed to be the guy who knows this stuff?
It sure could. And I haven't seen that in the numbers yet, but he's actually been to Georgia. He knows the situation. Anytime you turn to your strength, you start saying, well, if this is the situation we're going to face, maybe we need to get somebody like John McCain in there. The Obama camp, from what I've seen, has been quite silent here as well, being cautious, playing it carefully. So John McCain might be able to take advantage, but I'd say he'd have to get out in front of it and put a spin on it, or put some kind of a way for the public to make sense of it, because people in general in the United States don't even know what's going on in this region, or that it's very close to the war that's going on that we're involved in.
Mr. Simmons, we have less than a minute. I'd like to ask you about Barack Obama. Is it possible that a lot of people are turning away from him because we in the media love him?
Well, I think that many Americans love him too. This is the media bias issue, right? So yeah. I think that there is a sense of let's call it imbalance, but I'm not so sure it's bias, because he's exciting. Look, he's a story. He's different than, as he says, I don't look like those that have come before, and he sure doesn't, and that's worth covering. So you can't really blame the media for covering the story, and so that's my sense of Americans are attentive to that as well, and they're excited about him.
Okay. Solon Simmons, nice talking to you, sir. We always learn something when we speak with you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great to be back.